Hi, I'm Beth Weigel, and I'm Andy Hirsch, and we're going to spend a little time today talking about a project that we did at the Juneau Public Libraries called Every Voice Matters, and we've been recording Alaska Native oral histories around the focus of education. So this presentation is going to be in two parts. So one is why we think it matters and why we think you should do it. And the second half of it is the specifics, right? Brass tacks of what we did and how we did it and what technology we used, things like that. So to get started, that did not page forward. Okay, so I'm pretty certain everyone here already knows this, but representation is of course very important, and representation in what people read and what people watch and what people listen to has a lot of impacts on children and our society and adults and everybody. So what you see on the screen are some of the diversity statistics from 2013, and these are the kids at the young adult bestseller list. And what you'll notice is that they're overwhelmingly white and overwhelmingly straight and overwhelmingly people without disabilities. So we kind of took this focus, and this is why people should start their own oral history collections for their own community, because if you are doing oral history projects, what you're getting is local representation, and you can make them targeted projects like we did, where we are specifically looking for Alaska Native stories and personal experiences to better represent the people in our community. So talk for a brief minute about how we got started, which is last year, 2 years ago? No, 2 years. 2 years ago. 2 years ago, there was a curriculum challenge in our district, and so what had happened is the district bought books in bulk, and 4 of the books were challenged by a teacher and the greater community. And so these books were all specifically Alaska Native or American Indian issues. So one was about the Trail of Tears, one was, and the most important, or the one that resonated most in the community, was the one about a child that attended boarding school. And the community, many members of the community felt that this curriculum was whitewashed, it wasn't written by a Native person, and that it glossed over a lot of the impacts that impact people through today, so impacted elder generations and current generations. The district eventually decided to pull the books from the curriculum, and they are working with Gold Belt Heritage Institute to write replacement texts that focus on local history. So from the library's perspective, what we heard over and over and over again were people saying, we want to tell our own stories. We want the opportunity to have our conversation and our dialogue as part of the larger, broader community. And at the same time, the StoryCorps grant became available, so we applied specifically to do oral history so people could tell their own stories. So the next part of this presentation talks a little bit about some of the models and best practices that you can use. We'll obviously go over the StoryCorps model because that's the model that we are most familiar with, and talk a little bit about our process in recording the stories of our community and nearby communities. I also have some other resources to share if you're interested in oral history through the American Folklife Center, which is also one of the repositories for the StoryCorps stories. Also the American Library Association, Programming Librarian, the Oral History Association, and a new resource through IMLS, which is the Oral History in the Digital Age. So a lot of these different places have great resources for getting started in oral history. So as I mentioned, StoryCorps is the model that we used, and it is specific to libraries. We were part of the second generation of grantees to receive the StoryCorps at Your Library grant, and we were one of, I think, 10 libraries in this second generation. So Again, we're focusing on Alaska Native educational stories, so we have a little bit of a broader theme. But basically, we were given a lot of resources to do this, and we went to New York, to Brooklyn, to their headquarters, and had a training for 2 days and learned how to use all of the equipment and learned about the various parts of what the facilitator role is, what some of the other roles are, how to set everything up, how to train people to do this. So we used, again, the StoryCorps model, and on the StoryCorps at your library, you can Google that and find that. There's a lot of resources available there. Now, if you don't receive all that support from StoryCorps, there's still a lot of resources available through their website, and they have a do-it-yourself website, which takes you through their model and how to set it up and how to bring people in and partners and things like that. So they have great resources on their websites. In particular, the two things that are probably the most useful with our StoryCorps at your library, we had a toolkit for success, and I think that's also available online. And then just the regular StoryCorps model, they have using the interview materials. And one of the biggest things that they provide that I think is really helpful are the great questions that anyone can use. And the great questions are broken down into a lot of different areas of questioning. So family, time, holidays, all different kinds of areas of life. And then there's questions that go along with that. And it's a really great way for people who want to participate in an oral history project that aren't quite confident to know what they're going to talk about or how they're going to get started. So it's a really great resource to use the questions. So some of the other ones that I mentioned, Programming Librarian, they have a great webinar that's archived there that you can go through that has a wide variety of great resources that can help you get started in doing oral history. The American Folklife Center is also a good repository, and all of the people that release their interviews through the StoryCorps at your library grant and other StoryCorps events, they can have their stories archived at the American Folklife Center for the Library of Congress. And so they obviously have lots of great information, which includes things like how to choose the right technology and things like that to use. And they have some model projects that they have put on their website as well. And the Veterans Oral History Project is one of their model projects and has lots of information on how that was set up and designed by, I believe, a library. The Oral History Association also has a great web guide for doing oral history, and through this organization also is the Oral History Journal, and this is also available through a link on this new site called Oral History in the Digital Age. And I found this to be really helpful. There's Ask Doug, I believe, is one of the functions of this website, which is a little, you can press on it and then this little character comes up and talks to you about a variety of things like how much money will I need to buy the equipment? And so it takes you through lots of different questions. There's also a lot of other links there and videos and things that have been put together. And this is fairly new, so this is through the IMLS. Now, the StoryCorps model in particular I mentioned has a specific way that they set up their interviewing model. And, oh, we see that somebody just joined us. So welcome, Mary. I'm Beth, and Andy is here with me. Mm-hmm. And we're just going through this, and Jocelyn's back.
Oh, good.
So hopefully you'll be able to go back and take a look at some of the resources that I just went over. But right now I'm just starting to talk a little bit about the StoryCorps model in particular. And with the StoryCorps model, the ideal situation is that you set it up so that someone you know is interviewing you. And we went to Haines as part of our project and partnered with the Haines Public Library, and our counterpart up there, Jessie Morgan, set up like a dozen different interviews with people, and she set it up so that sometimes some of the people came in with their own interviewer and sometimes they didn't. And so she would step in and be their interviewer, which wasn't always ideal, but it was good in the sense that she was connecting with them on the cultural level.
But one of the pictures here you see is her doing this interview with her dad, and she was very comfortable interviewing her own father. And then the other person she interviewed was someone she worked with in the past. So ideally, it's great if you can get two people who know each other to interview each other. On a couple of occasions with our project, someone wanted to come in and do it, and they didn't have an interviewer. And so I'd step in and be the interviewer. On a couple of occasions, they provided the questions for us, and that made it a little bit easier. But sometimes it was just letting people talk as well, because they had a story to tell that they wanted to talk about. But the StoryCorps model does ideally have someone interviewing the storyteller that knows the storyteller. And we found it really important when you're setting up a situation like this, even if you don't think they're going to talk about anything emotional, to have a few things available for those people that are going to be doing the interviewing. Some tissues, some water, and just being sure to tell them that it's okay to take breaks and we can stop and things like that. So that was a really important part of the model. The other part of the model, it incorporates a facilitator, and you can see my coworker here, Andy, as a facilitator in the picture on the left, and she was monitoring the quality of the recording, and that was pretty much her only job, was to make sure that it sounded good, and she's going to talk a little bit more about what happens with that. And then their recommendation is that you have a second facilitator who helps with the paperwork and taking notes. And so when we had that time available, both of us would be there to do the interview, and she would make sure that the sound was good and that, you know, levels were good, and I took notes on a form that we designed, probably too many notes at times, that basically identified when someone talked about a place, a person, or a major event, kind of life event or world event or something like that, so that we could use those in our archival notes. And then there was also a form that we filled out for StoryCorps that had preset terms so that we could just circle them, and then when Andy did the archiving, she would choose them from a drop-down menu. So it's important, though, to take good notes if people are comfortable with that, because that helps you go back later on and find the keywords that you want to use when you're getting ready to archive it, so that when people do searches, they'll find that interview or that oral history that matches that same topic that they're looking for. So if it's the story of how I got my name or something like that, or it's a specific dance ritual or something, so that those things can be found more easily. But in a pinch, you can get away with just having one facilitator who's monitoring the sound as well as taking notes. It's not ideal, but it does work. In addition, we had some forms that needed to be filled out prior to the interview and then after the interview as well. Before the interview, we were given a data sheet from StoryCorps that asked a variety of questions about people's, how they self-identified, basically. And some of the time, people were very curious or wondered why they had to answer so many of these questions about, you know, what was their religious background, or what is their gender identity, or what is their, you know, identity in a variety of other ways. What did they do for a job? And so our answer, and the way we were trained, was to identify that StoryCorps is very interested in having a representation of all voices, and so this just allows us to make sure that all voices are being heard, and it's completely voluntary for them to fill it out, and they can self-identify in any way that they want to. And many people went into the space that allowed them to self-identify their clan and things like that, so that they could specifically say how they wanted to identify themselves. And then afterwards, we had a couple forms that they filled out that had to do with the release of the interview, so they could choose that. Those were also standard forms that StoryCorps provided us, and there were basically three options. They could choose to do a full release, which released the interview to StoryCorps, to the Library of Congress, American Folklife Center, and to our library and any of our archive partners that we add. Most people are generally pretty happy to sign the full release. But we had a few people who had specific instances where it wasn't so maybe interesting, they thought, to people locally. For example, we had a family come in and they spoke a lot of French Canadian and talked about their family because they had come from there and they spoke in French and they didn't feel like it was so local, but they wanted it to go into the Library of Congress. So that was the second option, was they could just have it archived into the Library of Congress, American Folk Life Center only. And then the third option was to have it no release. And all of the people that participated in our StoryCorps grant project received a free CD of their recording in full. So from there, we took a picture of people, and that was also optional. People didn't want their picture taken, didn't have to do that. And that's sort of how the facilitator and the notes and the forms worked in this model. We also were really lucky because we had a lot of community partners for our project, and I think that was a real key to the success of the project. And so we spent a lot of time vetting this idea of recording stories about Alaska Native educational stories and issues, and particularly boarding school, so the focus on any boarding school stories, because we knew that there was a trauma that had been passed down through different generations for some people when talking about this. So we spent a lot of time vetting the idea and making sure that people were comfortable with this, and that was one of the keys to thinking about broadening the focus when we did end up deciding that we would just call this educational experiences, so people could speak about anything they wanted to as related to learning or knowing or education, formal or informal. Let's see. I think after that, we've been spending some time talking about the technology.
So we, of course, are very lucky, and we're given a lot of technology from StoryCorps. And so I have the list of what we have specifically, but if you're interested in replicating the model, you don't necessarily need to go with this specific equipment. So what we used was a Marantz solid-state recorder. And what is important, you could use this recorder, or you could use a different recorder, is that it has two audio inputs, one for a left channel and one for a right channel. So that way when you have an interview with two participants, or sometimes more than two participants, each person feeds their audio in separately. And this is very important for recording quality, and it's important for being able to edit and separate things out in case you want to edit a story and have it play on the radio or use it in an educational setting. It's much easier to access and edit the files when you have two separate files per recording. And so then we also had two super-cardioid microphones, and what that means is those are microphones that pick up sound from one direction. So you put the microphone underneath, and it only picks up the sound from the top. It doesn't pick up the sound from the side. And this is very nice to have because when you have two people interviewing each other, you don't want a lot of background noise, and you don't want a lot of noise to come in on both audio channels for both people. And so you don't need, I have the type we have here, but you don't need that. You just need the unidirectional is another word for it. We also had stereo headphones, so when a person was managing the audio, making sure it wasn't too loud or too soft, they heard each one in one ear, stereo headphones. We also had a digital camera, and then you need a computer with audio editing software if you want to do anything with your oral history that you've collected. So what we used is we used Audacity, which is a free, I think I have a slide there later, a free open source software available online, and it is fantastic. So highly recommended.
And how did you learn to use Audacity, Andy?
I used it, I took a class on lynda.com from it. Anyway, so all of this stuff can be kind of expensive. If you're on a budget, you're looking at probably at least $1,000 in audio equipment. If you scale down some of the stuff, you could probably do it for about $700. Another option is your minimum technology, which is if you're going to use the StoryCorps model, they now have an app, and the app is designed for one person to interview another person and to share and to be able to share that file. And so all you need for that is an iPhone or an iPad with iOS 6 or an Android device and a computer that can edit. And so the way this works is it would be the individuals could, and you can of course change this to suit your community and your library, is the individuals interview each other and they can upload it online to StoryCorps, and they can also give you or other people the file. The downside of this is that it's one audio stream. It's much harder to edit for radio or to use in programming, but it also is very cheap comparatively. So it is an option if you're interested in pursuing oral history. You could start with this, and if it turns out that it's something your community loves and really values, then you could upgrade to the other equipment or not, things like that. So what we did is, so we edited the audio. We received the audio, and our recorder has it on an SD drive, put it in the computer, you now have audio. And so what you can see from the image is that there's the two different audio files. The top one is the main speaker. The bottom one is the interviewer. And it's really great to have both of these so that you can go in and manage and edit and make as nice of a story as possible. And another important component is cataloging. And like Beth mentioned earlier, what's very helpful, not mandatory, but helpful, is that some person takes notes during the recording. If you're going to add this either as a digital file or we're physically adding CDs to our collection that people can check out, it doesn't help if nobody can ever find it. So we are cataloging ours in OCLC. There is a model in OCLC for oral history records. Other StoryCorps stories have been edited and uploaded to OCLC, so you can download the records and modify them as necessary, or if you do have somebody who knows how to do original cataloging, that is another option. So when you're thinking about designing a project, and you should also be thinking about how people will access it. So one of the important things about cataloging is all of our oral history, all of the oral history stories we've done for this project have a very specific name. Every Voice Matters, Recording Alaska Native Educational Experiences. So that is going to be searchable terms. They're going to be searchable, people's names are going to be searchable terms, as well as oral history, because we could, in the future, do other projects. And there will be a physical collection for people to search through, but this is going to be available to anybody who has a library that can do interlibrary loan. So that is very good.
And as part of our grant, the StoryCorps Library grant, there were some parameters around how we could distribute and use our StoryCorps stories in programming as well as in circulation. So the reason that we'll circulate the full interviews on a CD is because that is a restriction of the grant, that we can't put the full interview digitally onto our website or anything like that. However, we can edit the stories of those people who have fully released their interviews, and we can use them in our programming. And generally speaking, we wanted less than 7 minutes or less edited time. So we're taking basically 40 minutes of interviewing and down to 7 or 2 or 4 minutes. And we have some examples that we'll share with you here at the end. So some of the ideas that we will be incorporating our oral history program into is here in Juneau, we have a city museum that's part of our library system, and they have a digital storytelling kiosk, which is in that picture there. And so we're going to be pairing a variety of historical photos with stories to match, and then people who go to the City Museum can then, click on and see a sort of slideshow, I guess, and hear the story that might match up with some of those photos. We also have thought about possibly collaborating with the State Library or State Historical section of the library and doing something on SchoolTube perhaps as well. So we have a couple of options with the programming that we're going to be doing. We also have been trying to do some outreach with some different special events that have happened, are happening in our community. We attended the Clan Conference back in October. It was in October, yeah. And that's, I think it's a biannual thing, so every other year. So people from all over the state came to Juneau for this conference, and it was specifically geared towards Tlingit and different clans throughout the area. Maybe it was just a Southeast conference. It wasn't so statewide. Yeah, it was Southeast. So we had a little listening booth there so people could go in and put headphones on and listen to the various edited stories that we had and talk to people about the project. And then this week during celebration, we're not specifically doing a program, but we are still doing outreach to ask people to, if they want to record a story. We've been given a couple of extensions through the StoryCorps to continue to be able to add to the Library of Congress archive. So, but at the end of June, that will come to a close. And I think we have a couple of examples of stories, if you guys want to hear those. So they're pretty short, but they're very powerful. We're going to switch. Yeah, we're going to switch over to Wayne Price. He is a master carver, and sorry we don't have his picture up for you, but he's a master carver. He's from Haines. He's particularly very involved right now in what's happening with the Longhouse that's going to be opened over in Gustavus for the National Park Service and their 100th anniversary. And so
he is here being interviewed. The audio is him and his wife sat down and talked together. Mm-hmm. So, all right.
My wife and I, she came into my life right after I sobered up. We have dedicated our whole life business to creation of monuments, and the next one we're going to do is also going to be what we call a healing totem. We also have healing dugouts, and they became a healing totem as a result of a vision in a sweat lodge that led to my recovery in the first place. And in that sweat, the Creator told me I had to do a few things. He said I had to make a healing dugout and a healing totem. I said, I've made a lot of dugouts, I've made a lot of totems. How do you make a healing one? What makes it a healing to where people will recognize it as a healing totem or a healing dugout? The Creator told me that when I'm carving that monument, that each chip that comes off that totem pole will represent a life that's been affected by alcohol and drugs on First Nation people. And we have worked together in the last 12 years, and we've done 2 healing dugouts. We've done 2 healing totems, 40-foot totems, 30-foot dugout, 28-foot dugout. And we're just now going to do the monument in Juneau, and that's for domestic violence awareness. So these monuments, I'm taking the art into never before ground, to where we're using monuments to bring awareness to things that occur in our lives that all of us know about. And we're bringing it to the table, bringing that kind of awareness to it. And that has its own rewards for me as a person that's in recovery, but it's also, we've touched thousands of lives with our work that we do, and we think of the healing totem we did. White Horse, it was 40 feet, and that's the only monument for the awareness of the boarding schools, the residential schools in the United States and Canada and Australia. It's the only monument that exists. And when they burn the chips that we saved from that totem pole, those chips burned for 2 days and 2 nights, and each chip represented a life affected by boarding schools, First Nation people. And in actual fact, that's all of us, because I'm a descendant of boarding school. And my dad went to the Wrangell Institute. These were not very great places. They were not very good places to be. But we did the healing totem in the Yukon, and we did past, present, and future. There has to be an awakening, and there has to be an apology, and there has to be recognized what really happened. Instead of not being talked about, it has to be talked about. And then a healing can occur. I know that in my recovery, that my darkest times I had to bring out in order for me to be a better person, so for me to be useful, where I can help other human beings, I had to get all that out. And then I can help somebody. And the rewards I get from helping keeps me sober. And that's how people heal. I think I don't want to bring such a dark cloud that we don't see the light. That human beings know how to heal. And it takes all of us to do it. I know it can be done because I've seen it. I watched there's over 1,000 residential school survivors that came to that pole raising in Whitehorse. It was November 3rd. It was minus 20. They carried that totem 7 city blocks, and they stood it up all by hand. And they were carrying it, and it was heavy. It was very, very heavy. And I said, you are holding up your culture. We will not fail today. And sometimes they only went 5 feet, and we had to set it down again. But they would switch out and change, and pick it up in 7 city blocks. They carried it by hand. I gave a speech that I still have it written down. And I said, who am I to even think I could even tackle something so big as boarding school atrocities, First Nation people? I said, let me tell you a story. And I would tell them how it came to me about the meaning of the chips. And I was called to do this. My recovery is based on making this a reality. A standing ovation was over 10 minutes. The room stood up and clapped, and did not stop. It was over 10 minutes. The appreciation of my work. So that takes totems into a whole new level. That's a class all of its own now. And a lot of the walks and the journeys that they're doing all accumulate at the totem now, so it's still being used. At the end of the vision in the Sweat Lodge, my Creator told me, he said, when you hear the songs of your ancestors come across the water, sung by young people, I'm done. And when we did the dugout in the Yukon, the kids paddled away, singing. I looked at my wife and I said, there it is. I have lived to see my vision complete.
You're a lucky man.
Yeah. Well, it's like Joe David said to us. A lot of people have visions, granted a vision. Not very many of them see it through. I saw it through. I'll still see it through. So our work, every time we turn a corner, there's more work. So this could be a healing time, and it could get big if they're doing our artwork. So it has no limits.
Such an amazing story. So yeah, that whole experience for both Andy and I, interviewing or listening to him speak when we were in Haines was very transformative. And I think that's the other part of oral history that I think is so very important. Not only that you're preserving the sound of one's voice and the stories of one's life or culture, but also that you participate in this very intense listening, and that is something that is so creative of a human connection and humanizes people in ways that we don't sometimes take the time to do. And so for me, that was one of those moments, just mesmerized and listening. I mean, we were there for an hour with him, and he spoke, and this is only 7 minutes. So a lot of our interviews ended up being like that. They were just very transformative and amazing, and captured your attention for deep listening. More? Yeah, we have one more we can play, which is Nora Down or I don't care either one. Let's do Daisy. Daisy was a really interesting situation in that this is another Haines interview, and she is 93, 4, somewhere in there, and she was on oxygen and bedridden or homebound. And so we went to her house, and her daughter helped us set this all up. But we were in a very small room, and there were like 3 or 4 of us in the small room, along with her and her bed, and she sat up for it. And so this is where it's going to sound, you'll hear the sound of her oxygen tank, and but it was really sweet. She was just so sweet, and she talked a lot about how she was given her name.
We were in Dry Bay, and my father was getting us ready to go to Yakutat, moving out of Dry Bay, because we had an early winter. Anyhow, they hadn't named me yet. My mother said, "Charlie, look yonder field. See Daisy, that's one last Daisy in Dry Bay. And we're moving out. So let's name this child Daisy. You want to name me Johanna after your sister in Sweden." My mother said, "Oh, I shall have a hard time to write that when she goes to school." And so they named me Daisy Johanna. What were your parents' names? Charlie Johnson and Esther Johnson. Yeah, my dad had to swim 7 rivers. He was working for Libby McNeil and Libby in Yakutat. They were building the cannery and the bunkhouse and all that. My dad was a carpenter. And then he figured, well, my wife is about due to have a baby. And so he walked. He walked that 50 miles. He walked 20 miles a day. He said, "Well, let's name her Daisy. That's the last Daisy in the field. This is the first Daisy. Keep me going." You have another name? Like Johanna. Johanna, what about a Tlingit name? Are you Tlingit? Yeah. Tlantnasake. That means the mother of the whole tribe. Tlantnasake. And that properly named. I have 13 kids. You have 13 kids? Yeah. I lost 3. So I had 10 left.
I really liked playing that one because I think it's a great example of how you don't have to be perfect. Like, the situation doesn't have to be perfect. Your recording doesn't have to be perfect. but what you record is really important.
Yeah, and when I hear that, I think back that story is reaching back probably more than 100 years, you know, because she talks about her dad being a carpenter and architect and building this, you know, cannery stuff and bunkhouses, and I'm thinking, wow, this is taking us further than 100 years in the past. So I always find that really humbling.
I think we're out of things to talk about, so if you have questions, we would love to hear them.
Not
Who's online?
Jocelyn's there.
Oh, okay, so Jocelyn, is this something that you're interested in doing in cake? These kind of oral histories? And you can share in the chat box. Have you guys been to cake?
No.
Oh.
Well, if you have, I know you missed the first part of the presentation, but if you have any questions on technology or the process that we went through, please give us a call or email us, and we would be happy to go over everything with you if you're really interested in this.
Yeah. Well, thanks for joining us today. We appreciate it.
Is your guys' emails on the PowerPoint?
No, but it could be. So. So here are our emails, and you can always call, and this is the general number for the library, and they will pass you along to either Beth or me, depending on who's available right then.
Okay, so if you guys would just read them for the...
Right. Great plan. So my email is andrea.hirsch@juneau.org, and that's HIRSH.
And my email is beth.weigel, that's WEIGEL, @juneau.org.
And the number for the Juneau Public Library is 586-5249.
All right. Well, thank you guys for coming in today and sharing this remarkable project. It's really something I would love to see libraries around the state replicate, because every community has its own story, and I think it's important to preserve it. But also because, as the title of your program is, every voice does matter, and people should be allowed to be heard. So, thank you.
Thanks.